So to kick off our day, we have a very special presentation from a good friend of mine and friend of Narrate, Jacob Larson. He's been in Gainesville since 1994. Was that what you told me? 1994? Yeah, came here as a student and never left. The story of many of our lives, I think. And he is a community leader, has done more things than I could list out here to make Gainesville a great place, and many people know him as the owner of the Bull downtown, where we actually host the majority of our storytelling meetups every month, if you have been to one of those. So yeah, without further ado, here's Jacob to kick off our day.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know if you've heard the phrase "the velvet rut" is often attributed to Gainesville because it's hard to leave, but it feels good to stay. Anybody find themselves having that narrative? Well, I've found that throughout my life, I've loved to create spaces. When I was a little kid, 4 years old in Ohio, when Billy Joel's "Still Rock and Roll" to me would come on, I would rip my blanket off of my bed and I would lay it out perfectly perpendicular to the Pioneer speaker that my dad had bought when he first got married. And I would listen to the song, didn't realize that I was probably laying out a space ready to invite other people to join me and being entertained. Later on, when we moved to Florida, we would play G.I. Joe. The Cobras were the bad guys. I was often the good guy. But we would dig foxholes in the groves, and going through the dirt, through the sugar sand, to the topsoil that was a little darker, down to the orange clay that you can find in Central Florida, I would make shelves and decorate them with my Tonka trucks and gradient the oranges from dark green to the ripe orange, because if I captured someone, I wanted them to have a good experience. I wanted my enemies to enjoy their incarceration. Later on in middle school, Todd, who would have an accident on his ATV in that same orange grove, would develop a severe brain injury, and we would make space at our table to invite him to experience life again, how it kind of used to be, and we would struggle in finding ways to figure out inclusion and conversation. Well, I went off to college, came here to UF. I was an RA, where I would create space for students to share their hearts, their heartbreaks, their story woes. They're getting kicked out of various colleges or having to leave. And I found myself the opportunity to hear many stories. One story was not at the college, it was at a Jiffy Lube. I was getting my 1995 Ford Ranger, some update, and the gentleman and his girlfriend who were sitting next to me, about my same age, started sharing a story about how he was in a car accident on a dirt road, lost control, impaled himself on a fence that was a 4x4 fence, went through his chest, out his back, just missing his spine. And then he says, "Do you want to see it?" I said, "Yeah." He took off his shirt in the waiting room of the Jiffy Lube, and I could see his heart beating because he didn't have a rib cage. Then he said, "Do you want to touch it?" And I answered before I thought. I said, "Yeah." So I put my hand on his heart, and in my spirit, I heard a voice say, "I've made you to gently hold the hearts of people." And here I was, this very tangible experience. Well, I also volunteered in public schools with an organization, and I got to hear the stories of middle schoolers and high schoolers, and finding some of the socioeconomic differences that existed in our community, becoming friends with teachers and custodial workers and the lunch ladies, helping sweep and wipe down the tables. My first career out of college was Young Life, where I continued to hear the stories of middle schoolers and high schoolers. I was then invited to be a community pastor at a church, which I still am, where I heard the stories of peers, of kids, of parents, but also of the divorced and the widowed and the widower. I began going to conferences where one of the taglines of my favorite one I went for every year for a decade was "Think well, stay curious, advance good." I created a nonprofit called Society Promotions, where we would promote and produce art and cultural experiences to benefit and inspire social change. And we would hold events at local venues with local artists, supporting local causes. And one of them was at the Bull, which then I was invited, after becoming friends with the owner, to buy, saying, He said, I love the things that you do here when Society Promotions meets. This is what I would like to continue to do. Would you do it? I thought it was a crazy idea, but unfortunately none of my friends, peers, or mentors thought it was crazy. They said, this has been your narrative leading up to this. This seems right. So I'm still there now. We would move into creating that space that already existed and continuing on the good work of helping to make it an expectation for there to be the sharing of vulnerability, to desire transparency. And the way that that works is we change the art out on the walls every month, and through the art we have people expressing themselves, their heart's desires, their narrative, their outlook on the city of Gainesville. And so that speaks. We wouldn't have the stage, which is just an oriental carpet on the end of the rim, but we have singer-songwriters talking about through their lyrics how they see the world, how they've experienced life. We have storytelling through GNV. We have fiction reading. We have poetry reading. We host the Kings on the Mic, which is the GHS high school poetry slam. And for all these things, they marinate the walls of the space, and it creates an environment where it's okay to become who you are. It's okay to be seen for who you are. It's okay to be known, and it's encouraged to know. So how do we cultivate intentionally these experiences? How do we intentionally create community? I would say our experiences shape us. If you're an introvert and you're like, I could not do these things as an extrovert, we can cultivate the places that are already doing these things by participating in them. And I would say if you find yourself in a space that does not allow your story to be heard, it might not be a place that actually helps promote community. We also do this by calling out what we see in others. When we see people that have in themselves the bent desire to create community. I laid out the blanket when I was 4 years old, invited Todd to come to the table, but then I was invited to become an RA. I was invited to become a community pastor. I was invited to go on staff with Ken Life. I was invited to go to the conferences that helped me to have a better outlook on the world and support what's already good and beautiful within my community. And I was invited to buy the bull. Those things were called out within me by people who saw something. And it shaped me and continued to bring me to a place where then the bull is just an extension of who I am through the experiences that I've been able to have and through the invitations that people have given to me. The other thing that I would say with creating intentional community is we look for the ways and reasons that we can encourage diversity. The diversity that comes at a table where we have the rich and the poor, the oppressed and the privileged, is a place where we have uncommon coalitions to create ideas and solve problems in ways that are holistic and bring everyone into the table, that esteem everyone, that dignify everyone. I was on the think tank for Gainesville for All on jobs and families, and I love coming up with ideas, but I can tell you at least half of the ideas I would come up with were gently shot down by someone who lived in the neighborhoods and knew the stories and told me stories that helped shape my understanding and my lack of understanding and how much I have to learn and grow to be able to love our city better. We also learned that when we don't have diversity, when we have homogeneous thinking within a group of people, we can see in societies throughout history that is exactly when the decline begins, where you lack ingenuity, where you lack creativity. So I want to challenge us today that we would create intentional communities together, that we would dig down and capture the hearts of people, even the hearts of our enemies. That we would remember that we were all made to gently hold the hearts of our neighbors. And that we would cultivate and create safe spaces for our stories to be heard, our stories to be told, and that we would create intentional communities where we will know and be known. Thank you. Have a great conference.